Welcome. I'm Alfred Weber, and we have the great honor and privilege today of having as our special guest author and researcher Robert M Stanley. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you for having me back, Alfred.
You know, I received from you a few days ago an outline, and then today you've really put out a magnificent web page that we're going to show both in an article and on the screen, where people can go to this for Project Soul Light. And what you wrote to me, I'll just quote from parts of it. You said, on October 23rd, 2011, all light workers on Earth are being asked to direct their light to 3 select locations: Washington, D.C., London, and Rome. And then on November 11th, 11/11/11, all light workers on Earth are being asked to direct their light to the centers of the sun, the earth, and the moon. And could you tell us more about the genesis of this project and why these dates, why these locations, and who are light workers?
That could be anybody, Alfred, including yourself and I. But those are people, in my opinion, who have come to the realization that we are energetic, intelligent life forms, and that we do absorb and emit light. So what my understanding was this: when I asked for guidance on this particular subject, which is, we're in a transitionary period. Most everybody in this audience realizes that there's something profound going on. I wanted to do something with my public voice to try and help people coordinate their efforts in a way that would actually assist the transition. I mean, we know that certain beings from higher dimensions and even other worlds have been coming here, according to what you've been reporting, what I've been reporting, that they're coming here to assist us, but that doesn't mean we can't do anything to help in the process. So when I asked my contact, specifically a being I met in 1985 when I ascended up into a light, or another dimension, I guess you call it, I asked him recently, what can we do? And so the next morning I was given this information, which I then passed on to you, and now we're going to be sharing this with everybody else. Now, the October 23rd date, some people say, is the end of the Mayan calendar. It's a Sunday, why not? Specifically, as I wrote in the article, what people will be able to link to, is that our bodies, cities, planets, and stars all absorb energy and then radiate back out the energy, okay? So if there's a problem, I believe we have an opportunity to send our soul light to these affected areas so that they can heal and evolve quicker. As opposed to, in other words, if somebody has good intentions and they say, I'm going to pray for everybody at the Vatican, that's wonderful. But, or Washington, D.C., but if a group of us around the world at a specific time send that collective light energy to that location, it will have a profound effect. It's sort of like flipping a switch. The cockroaches are going to scurry. They don't like those who work in the dark don't like it when you shine a light on. And they say the best disinfectant is sunlight. Well, in some cases, soul light, and that's what I'm calling this project, soul light, is what is needed in these specific cities where I call them fortresses of darkness, because there's so much manipulation and control and just lies coming out of those cities and affecting the entire planet and our entire society. So I'm kind of speeding through this, trying to summarize. Where does this go with the planetary thing? Is today, as we do this interview, is September 26th. And there's an alignment between the sun, earth, and moon and common element. And a lot of people are feeling it. Some people are, they're just going on about their business. But personally, I feel it very, very much. And you got to understand, if you don't already know this, the earth doesn't exist in a vacuum. Without the moon or the sun, or I should say, Without all three of those bodies, life here would be impossible. So again, what I've understood over many years of researching, sometimes with physicists and NASA engineers and stuff, we have come to the conclusion, and I think there's plenty of evidence to back this up, that even stars and planets absorb cosmic radiation and then radiate it back out. Of course, it's different once it's passed through the core of the planet or the star. But everything is energetic, and it's constantly being exchanged. The concept of entropy is a very negative and misleading term. The energy really is light and consciousness, and it's here, and it is evolving, and we're a huge part of that. And the people on the dark side have been doing everything in their power to drug us and distract us and put us into a very negative frame of mind, so that we wouldn't want to do or couldn't feel empowered to do these kind of, I call it a group alchemy. Because we are taking our light from a higher source, beaming it down to the earth will then absorb it and transmute, use that energy to further speed along the transition.
Right. Now, I, just to, support this with a very voluminous scientific and experimental evidence, I happen to be about halfway through a copy of researcher and author David Wilcock's latest book, which is called The Source Field Investigations. And the first part of the book is focused on exactly that, soul, mind, and body. And he has collected very impactful scientific experiments which show that, for example, the power of 7,000 people meditating together dropped the crime rate of Washington, D.C. enormously. I can't pull out of the book right now exactly what the percentage was, but it was huge. I mean, it wasn't like 2%, it wasn't 10%, it wasn't 20%, it was huge. And let's say it was around 50% or more. And that all of this, the model that he puts forth, he calls the source field, i.e., we're all in a part of a non-locational field outside of time and space. Right. And that the impact of even 1, 2, 5,000, 7,000 people focusing positive energy and thoughts on that part of the on the source field alters behavior within the entire source field. To show you how powerful this is, there are experiments that show that when you even think about cutting your grass, the grass screams. And this is why, he argues, that if you go to a lot of the indigenous cultures, they would communicate through the source field to the fruit that they were going to eat, to the grass or twigs they were going to cut back, to the animal they were going to kill and eat. And also that even when you eat your food, meditating on the food and bringing energy to it affects the source field of the food. And because it's non-local, you get back to, whatever vegetable patch it was where your squash came from, wherever your rice are. If you're carnivorous, whatever that animal was, be it a fish in the ocean or some other animal. So I'm just saying that this is supported by very powerful experimental data.
Yes, I agree, and I'm very, very encouraged and feeling very optimistic about the future when I see books like Source Field coming out. In some ways, it's a refresher course for some of us, and for other people who've never heard of this information And it's all part of this quickening that's happening within our local matrix. I mean, you can call it whatever you want, but it's clear that we're all connected. The non-local field that you're talking about, actually, information moves through it quicker than the speed of light as we measure it. So when, as you say, a group of people focus their...
Okay, so what we're saying is that this source field, now that we've investigated, is really the underpinnings or the infrastructure behind Project Soul Light, or one of the aspects of it that we can show scientifically this is true.
Well, yeah, and we can actually quantify the results by, well, some people are going to be skeptical, obviously, but as you pointed to, studies where people group meditation has lowered the crime rate. You know, certain people, they say it can cause, you know, rain to occur in certain areas where it's really badly needed. I mean, this is what the Hopi Indians have been doing for thousands of years. And so we're not just talking about a visualization. This isn't an exercise. This is an actual group alchemy event where people are invited to focus their consciousness, which is energy, which is light, to the areas that are in darkness and that are causing our planet and our society a lot of trouble. So this is just the beginning, I think. We'll see how it goes. I hope people will respond. I can't take full credit for it, not that I really want to, but as I said, all I did was ask this being of light that I met in 1985. I try and keep in touch with them, especially when we're up against situations like this. I honestly admit, I don't have a lot of answers when it comes to these things, so why not ask somebody who's, you know, higher up, as it were, in the cosmos?
Right. Now, let me go through and could you tell us a bit about your experiences meeting this being, and have you had like interactions with the being over time, or was it the one-time thing now that you followed up, or?
Well, it happened on an equinox in 1985 when I was on top of a mountain in Malibu. And what I kind of mentioned to you and your audience about this before, but I'll be more specific. I was working security at the time, and I intervened. A young boy had cut his face open, and he was going to bleed to death. And I basically made sure that he got the medical attention he needed so he wouldn't die. But in the process, I found that, and this is going to sound very strange, I found that he was, there was an entity that was preying on him and his family. I didn't equate it with demons at that time, or certainly not aliens, but many years later, decades later, after doing all this research, I would have to say that was a demonic entity that was actually feeding off of the pain, the fear, and just the confusion that it generated. And here's what happened. The boy had was playing a second-story beach house. He was playing on the carpet, and he said, his grandmother said he just suddenly got up and ran across the room full speed and smashed face first into a plate glass sliding door. Broke the entire door open, okay? And, I mean, because it wasn't safety glass, I mean, it just was huge shards, and it just sliced his whole face open, specifically up in here. And I had talked to the boy a few minutes earlier, because I used to keep my surfboard over there, and I noticed he already had a scar in his forehead. So as I rushed to his aid, and I got the paramedics to come and stabilize him and take him to the hospital, which was actually there is no hospital in Malibu. Don't ask me why. So they had to emergency evacuate him. And so I was asking the grandmother, what happened, you know, and she started telling me, and I said, look, I don't mean to pry, but I noticed he's got this, already has a scar on his forehead. How did he get that? And she said, well, last year he was playing in his father's pickup truck with a cat. The cat jumped out. He jumped out after it head first and landed on the trailer hitch and busted open his forehead. And I said, well, what was he doing? Why, you know, what was his thinking today when he cut his head again? She says, I'm just glad the door was shut because I think he was going to jump over the railing head first. And she says to me, I think that he thinks he can fly. Which, it may sound very innocent, but like an 8, 9-year-old child really shouldn't be having those fantasies. I don't think it was a lack of adult supervision. His grandparents were there. Like I said, I got a chill. When I was there, I got this crazy-ass, chill up my spine. I mean, all my hair was standing up because I felt there was an entity in the room. And it absolutely freaked me out because I wasn't expecting that. It's one thing to, you have a medical emergency, you deal with it. But something paranormal like that, I mean, even though I was raised on metaphysics, okay? My dad was a minister for self-realization. He was a disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda. So I knew about meditation and metaphysics prior to that event when I was 25 years old. 1985, I was 25. But I wasn't prepared for what that meeting, having that entity touch me. I guess it was kind of ticked off that I was intervening. That's all I can assume because it didn't really talk to me. But I'm trying to explain to you how I ended up meeting this other being of light, the complete polar opposite of the dark entity that was feeding off of or preying on this child, much like the movie The Exorcist. I think he was possessing this child and wrecking this family. So anyway, later that day, I was sort of confused as to how to proceed because I felt horrible. I mean, this thing had touched me, and I couldn't just put it out of my mind. Like, tough luck, kid. You're not my problem. I didn't feel that way at all. I felt like, wow, that is pure evil. Whatever that thing is, it's truly evil. I didn't know how to deal with it. So I went to my neighbor's house, and he was a very, I guess you call him a mentor. He was, he'd survived being a quadriplegic? Yeah. He woke up, he was in the military, he woke up in the backseat of a car, paralyzed, because his buddies were driving drunk. He was passed out in the backseat, he woke up, and he felt nothing from here down. He told me, he didn't even tell me about your other body, he said, I walk a lot. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, well, in my other body, I can walk around, I mean, eventually he became a paraplegic, so he could actually move around in a wheelchair. But he was an interesting guy. And anyway, he recommended to me that evening, he said, go to the mountains, tonight's the equinox, look into the sun, watch it set as the moon is rising tonight. He says, you look for a vision. Okay, all right, whatever. I mean, I had to do something. And I didn't know who to call, so I just went up to this mountain, unexpectedly, unprepared, just went there. And I started meditating and praying to the Creator, God. I mean, whoever's up there. I was looking into the Milky Way after the sun and the moon did their number. I actually started to practice the Om in a way that I'd never done before. Again, it's drawing on things I'd learned as a child growing up. Right. So I used that carrier signal to broadcast the overtones, the harmonics, and I thought, well, that's probably going pretty far. And I'm going to broadcast one single thought, pretty simple, which is love. I've seen something purely evil and hateful. I would like to, I'm thinking if anybody's out there that's, that responds to love, I'd like to know about it. So honestly, didn't have any expectation, but I didn't know what else to do. It was really intuitive, Alfred. I was just sitting there meditating for a long time. Eventually, hours went by. I got tired. I laid down. Actually, it was on the ruins of an old Nike base where they used to have a radar system. And I laid down on the cement there, these pillars, and almost immediately, you know how when you're falling asleep, sometimes you feel like you're floating and you kind of catch yourself? Mm-hmm. It wasn't like that. This time I didn't catch myself. I just floated right out of my body into the light. Now, I know it was a full moon, but where I was shielded. My face was shielded from the moonlight. And suddenly, like I said, even though I was laying on cement, I felt like I was floating on a cloud. And it actually got really bright. And then I thought, wow, this feels nice, But then, to my surprise, somebody came up to me out of the light. I was confused. I was actually startled. I didn't feel threatened, but I was like, whoa, who's that? And he came up to me and faced me, much like we're doing now. And in my mind, I'm saying, wow, who is that? And he said to me, I'm your father. Now, he may have said, I am the father. I don't know. I was a little shook up by the whole event. But the last thing I consciously remember was waking up, sitting bolt upright. It felt like no time had passed whatsoever. Actually, the last thing I remember, he was laughing about my predicament because I was really, when he said I'm your father, I was like, what? You don't, he looked like, there's a picture of it on the website, the link that I provided you. I tried to recreate this picture because it was so unusual. The guy, he was radiating light. I don't know how, but we were in the light, but he was brighter than all the light. And he's wearing this white robe, and he had long hair and a beard. I mean, he looked typically like, you know, like Jesus or some Messiah, a master. I don't know.
Right.
Anyway, sorry to use those cliche terms, but
yeah.
Look, here's the thing. He was glowing. And the craziest part was the center of his eyes, where you normally have a pupil that's dark. There was light coming out of his eyes. And I'm looking at this guy and go, you're my father? Don't think so. You know, and like I said, last thing I remember, he was laughing. I sat bolt upright. Hours had gone by, and the only reason I know that because the moon was almost setting now. And I knew something had happened, but I couldn't, my conscience, again, I think I was really in shock over the whole thing. And, but there's confirmation, okay? I hate to be so long-winded about this. That's why I started writing this as a novel, because it sounds so crazy. Later that day, I went back to the beach to my job as a security guard. And I delivered a message to the boys' grandparents, and I told them, and I could have got fired for this easily. I went in there and I said, look, I have to tell you something very weird. Please don't take it the wrong way, but you can heal the scars on your grandson's face, but unless you do something to heal the scars in his soul, this will continue. I didn't explain the whole thing about the demon and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I think whoever that guy was, the radiant being, I think he and I together did something to try and block that kid, to give him a better opportunity to grow up without having to constantly, you know, cut his face open and cause all this anguish for the family. I mean, in other words, it's what Catholics call an exorcism. I really think I participated in a really high-level exorcism, and here's why I say this. There was a friend of my girlfriend's at the time, who was sitting with me when the boy had the accident.
Right.
I didn't tell her anything was going on, but she left. She came back the next day, okay? She says to me, hey, I saw you last night. You taught me how to fly. I'm like, get out of here. You know, I really thought she was, I was very tired. I thought she was pulling my leg. And again, I hadn't told her anything of what had happened. But she says, oh, it was just amazing, you know? And, I mean, this is a very materialistic girl. You got to understand, her favorite thing was driving fast cars and smoking cigarettes and going to the mall.
Right.
So this wasn't on her radar at all. But she started describing to me how, she says, you know, it's kind of like Peter Pan. You came into the room, took my hand, and you flew me, we flew up to the mountains. And I'm like, the mountains, really? And she says, yeah. And you were trying to teach me how to fly. And she says, but I wasn't getting it at all. And she says, at one point you got really mad at me, and you put me into a shopping cart and started pushing me down the hill. And then she got kind of upset with that situation, so she jumped out and started flying on her own. And she says, I followed her back to her bedroom, made sure she was safe, and then I left. Okay, that could be a weird coincidence, except when later in the day, my grandmother called. A very opposite of this girlfriend. You know, my grandmother was a very spiritual lady. She had survived a lot of surgery on her back. She had a tree fall on her when she was just like 5 years old. It crushed most of the vertebra. They weren't even sure she was going to live. So she had a very close relationship with other worldly beings, or she called them the extracelestials. She was an old school lady, beautiful person. Anyway, she calls me up and she says, Robbie, I saw you in my bedroom last night, and she says, you were trying to tell me something, I can't remember what it was, but the light sparkling around you was so beautiful. She says, it was the most amazing. She said, I just had to call and tell you. And I'm like, wow. Okay, so obviously wherever I was, I didn't black out. I think I whited out, actually. I think I went to a higher dimension, was working with this individual, I guess a relative of mine, or maybe all of ours, I don't know. Maybe he did create us, I don't know. So I kept it, I really could not just forget the fact that he intervened on my behalf to try and help me through my confusion. and also to, I guess, to touch these other people that were close to me at that time. There may have been others. They never told me that I reached out to that night or morning. So I forget. It was like a few weeks later or something. I did see this individual again. Now this time I know I was asleep. However, it was one of those lucid dreams where it was daytime. I was at my house in Malibu, even though that's not where I was asleep. I was sleeping in an apartment that I was renting in the city. But in the dream, I'm standing at the house where I grew up in Malibu. I could literally feel the driveway. We had a gravel driveway. The warmth of the rocks and the crunchiness of it, and the, I don't know, there's something about it, a really pretty day at the beach. It makes you feel alive, more alive. And I'm looking at this blue sky, and I'm thinking, oh, yeah, this is beautiful here. And suddenly, out of the sky comes 3 UFOs. I think they were silver in color. They passed over the house, and they went out into the ocean. And I'm looking at that going, wow, oh my God, that's exciting, it really got my attention. And the next thing I know, the UFOs, moments later, they had now changed to, sorry. They changed color. They were now, instead of silver, they were golden. They went exactly the same way they came. They came out of the water and went back to the east. And I'm looking at this and go, wow. So I yelled towards the house where my dad had a studio. He was an artist at the time. And he used to paint some nice pictures, paintings. And I started yelling, like, Dad, come check this out. UFOs. And who appears as this guy? It was almost like something out of Star Trek. In just a flash of light, he appeared in a flash of light. And instead of questioning who this guy was at that point, I walked over and I embraced him like family, gave him a hug, and the next thing I know, I woke up. Again, it's one of those things where the 2 times I'd come face to face with this guy, I immediately stood up and I'm completely conscious, trying to figure out who he is. What's my relationship to him?
Right. So this event is really, would you call it your awakening as a light worker, to kind of bring it back to the, that is being able to act in a multi-dimensional fashion. Right. Whether
I was fully conscious of what I was doing, because honestly, I wasn't. I really wasn't as aware as I am now. I mean, obviously, I was a lot younger, and I had different priorities in my life, and I just hadn't learned as much, really, even though I knew a lot about metaphysics. It was just, let's put it this way, it was just the beginning, not the end. In fact, I went back to that place in the mountains looking for him, just to see if I could find him during the daytime, possibly. And what I found were the ruins of an ancient Lemurian temple. That really shocked me. That was, I thought, even more confirmation in the fact these people were saying that they'd seen me, because, whoa, wait a minute. Here now, I am actually standing in the ruins of an ancient temple that nobody seems to know about. And of course, again, skeptics can say whatever they want, but I studied that for over 10 years. I took hundreds of people up there on tours. And it's on my website. You can see the pictures for yourself. These are megalithic monuments that are ancient. They predate the local native Chumash people. Clearly, they were there for like 9,000 to 10,000 years. When I talked to them about it, they said, no, that was made by the first people. Well, who were the first people? They said, well, they were destroyed in a flood. Okay. There used to be a coastal valley right off where the current coastline is now. It was extended further out when the water level was lower before the end of the last ice age. There was a coastal valley out there they called the Mu. So Mu is a word like Lemuria, or the Mu is something, you see all over, like in Hawaii, very prominent. So, like I say, it was just the beginning of, and oddly enough, the more I went back to these ruins over there in Malibu and studied them, we started, not just me, but people that I bring up there, especially at night, we would start seeing UFOs, or I should say the UFOs saw us. They made it very clear, because sometimes they would beam a light down. I don't know if they were taking our picture or what, but it wasn't the military. I guarantee you that. It was not the military, because the military can't fly that fast without making any sound. And why they would be beaming lights on us, because we were in the dark. It's not like we had a bonfire or anything like that. We were just sitting there in the dark at this particular vortex of energy. I mean, you ever been to Sedona, Arizona?
No. That's one place. Oh, sure.
Yeah. So it's like Sedona. There's these dome-shaped rocks, and there's the energy. In fact, where I was sitting the night I met the father, there's a dome naturally dome-shaped thing with crystals and water and stuff, and really powerful vortex. Like I said, I didn't know it at the time. I was just drawn to it intuitively, and the ruins themselves, probably a colony of Lemuria, certainly on the outskirts of that continent, according to the Colonel Churchward. And so, you know, here's the thing, Alfred. I really appreciate you giving me time to just kind of explain this.
Sure.
Because it's been on my mind for a long time. This is one of the reasons I recently resigned from the news. Because those guys, news is all about entertainment, and that's fine. But right now, we're in such a critical transitionary time, and I feel some important information to share with people not in a joking manner. I mean, look, I enjoy having a good time as much as anybody else, but there's a time and a place for all that stuff, and right now I feel like we need to really focus on getting through this transition, as many people as possible to get through this together. So whatever I can do to assist in that, as I told you off the air, that's what I want to do. I still maintain that I'm here to help.
Sure.
You know, and I know you are, so I'm just going to say thanks again for having me on.
Totally. Look, so this was the outgrowth of kind of your awakening as a light worker, just to use that term,
right,
back in 1985. So now in developing Project Soul Light, what was the contact that you had? Was it the same
you had a role in this. You asked me, what is the topic you would like to discuss?
Oh, I see.
And so
I see. This is an interactive. This is an interactive project.
Right. I asked this guy, whoever, he's my father, I guess. What do you suggest? I need some guidance. I do that all the time. Before I come on this show or any show, I always ask him and the others that are with him, because there are a lot. Just like there's a legion of demons on this world, there's even greater number of the light workers within just this galaxy alone. I mean, and there's what, trillions or billions of galaxies? I mean, it boggles the conscious mind. I think our subconscious mind, you know, you have been reporting a lot of good news. And that was the other thing that I felt that was not happening on the mainstream news, is they're still playing this game of, you know, provoking people with, you know, gotcha kind of comments and disjointed data, you know.
Right.
It's now is the time for people to really make sense of who we are, where we are, and where we're headed, individually and collectively, because we are a collective. We are a collective. As you said, that source field, that non-local field of consciousness, we all exist within that. Yeah, we have our unique characteristics, and those should be honored and celebrated. But what I see about our species is that we have a much greater potential when we stop killing one another and start cooperating. It's you know, we don't need to compete. We really don't. There's plenty to go around. This is the work of the dark side, in my opinion. They constantly make people fearful and confused and this greedy. You know, this is not a good emotion for us. It's not serving us well, and it hasn't. It never served any society well. And I really feel optimistic. You know, in the last few weeks, especially the news that's coming out, especially through outlets like yours, that we're starting to awaken. People, and we are getting the assistance, even though a lot of people aren't asking for help. That's okay. The good guys know where we're at, and they're going to ease us into this transition. And that's the other thing I mentioned in the webpage I posted about Soul Light, is that it's fine to have someone help you to help yourself. But the one thing that they don't want to do is do it for us. Just like, okay, I'm a dad. My son is 15. And there's a point where I need to, you know, separate and let him do things on his own. Otherwise, he'll never learn. Okay, he won't be able to take care of himself, and that would be very unfair as a parent to not to give him that opportunity. Obviously, you want to make sure he's safe and stuff. But you know, you understand what I'm saying? That they really, when this being said, he's my father. Maybe that was metaphorical, but he seems to have a that kind of relationship with me. and probably quite a few other people, although I think Jerry Wills is the only other person that I've ever met that described that individual the same way that what I remember.
Right, and Jerry Wills being, actually he was on Exopolitics TV here, and you were the person that introduced me to him, and then I found out that we have a lot of mutual colleagues also. He was brought here as an infant from Tau Ceti as part of a project of the Council of Worlds
Right.
that brought infants from different other worlds to kind of leaven and help in our transformational process. Now, in your contacts with your source and your kind of process, then how did these two? Oh, but by the way, I just want to mention this as consultation. The date that Dr. Carl Johan Kellerman talks about as the end of the ninth wave, and kind of from that there's no more fettering or up and down on the wave of unity consciousness coming from the core portal in our interdimensional portal in our universe. He mentions that as October 28th.
Okay.
And that's the date. Like 11/11/11, people are cued into October 28th. Do you want to make that adjustment on the project, or were you told October 23rd?
No, I thought it's possible it was October 28th. The 3 and the 8 actually look quite similar.
Yeah. I see. You were told that. Okay. Could you tell us what you were told in the communication and how this was, how you received that information?
You know, Alfred, that's a good question. In telepathy, it isn't so much a stream of words, because those could be misconstrued. It was a series of visions, which, again, skeptics would say, oh, you're just imagining, you have an overactive imagination. I don't think so. Again, because you can sort of quantify that these events, you know, and actions they have some intelligence behind it, other than my wild imagination. So I thought I was seeing the calendar date of October 23rd, and specifically those 3 cities, as needing an influx of soul light. And it was really weird, because, I mean, David Wilcock, when he described that, you know, our souls beaming the light to our bodies, I'd known that for I don't know how long. And for him to articulate it to an audience, I was like, wow, somebody finally actually says that, you know, an incredible way, not just like, hey, guess what I think today. That was a mind blower, because I'd always kind of known that, again, because through experience, and also what other people over the years, one particular person told me that there was a debate about when does life start, physical life, and he said when the zygote gets to a certain stage is when it can actually receive the cosmic energy. And he gave me an analogy of like some sort of electron tube. When it's filled with gas, you can actually see neutrinos exciting it. It's the same thing with your soul. Your soul beams down into this vessel and activates it like a spark. Boom. It's the spark of life. And then there's a connection made. I guess you call it wireless these days, you know, but regardless, it's a connection. And the web of life goes on. But anyway, I do think that we're all people who want to become awakened right now are really they need a little more orientation to put it into context, and that's why I appreciate what you're doing, and people like David Wilcock and so many others who've given us more information than we've ever had before. Absolutely. You know, the other thing I had mentioned to you before about previously, I think a few years, let's see, 2007, I think, when I first got introduced to digital physics. And that was Robert Campbell, physicist who works for the military. Oddly enough, when he was in college, he started doing transcendental meditation. Then he met Bob Monroe. And Bob Monroe needed somebody to measure the protocols of remote viewing. So here you have this physicist who understands meditation and that projecting your consciousness. He meets Bob Monroe, and they start. He's like measuring the remote viewing. You're projecting your consciousness out. So they quantify all this stuff, and in the process, Mr. Campbell starts getting information from his sources as he moves to the higher level. They were started telling him stuff about who we are really, or where we are within this matrix. That consciousness, digits of consciousness, comprise everything. So energy, matter, consciousness, they're all the same thing. And I'll give the analogy again because I think it's kind of slick. Is that just like a drop of water can take three-phase states of solid, liquid, and gas, consciousness can be pure consciousness, it can be energy as we know it, or it can be matter. And again, this is just a level, we're talking about levels of vibratory frequency. Some people call them dimensions. I'm not sure that's accurate, but for the people who are metaphysically minded, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. That kind of information coming to us now, I know a lot of people still haven't heard this, but there's a link. I created a new section on the top of the unicusmagazine.com.
Okay.
If you click where it says Know Thyself, this digital physics is there, the Soul Light Project, and a few other things that I feel are very critical for people who are waking up or know someone who's waking up that could actually benefit from that stream of data being provided to them free of charge. It's all there for you.
Right.
But it's the fact that alchemy is now being revealed after being hidden for so long. All that is, if for anybody who hasn't heard this, alchemy is a way of condensing light and applying it. Just like, that's what creation is. This living energy, light, consciousness is constantly evolving. And we have a role. We interact with it, or we could disconnect from it and become completely ignorant and in denial. That's unfortunate because that's what's happened here for a long time. But we are gradually awakening, or better yet, sort of like, when a butterfly goes through the chrysalis, and the metamorphosis as it turns from the caterpillar into the butterfly.
Right.
That's what I see us doing as a species in this world.
Exactly. Now, so you actually saw these dates, and there's a close similarity between the 3 and the 8, because it could have been October 28th, which is the date of the end of the time of the 9th wave,
right?
And to focus on these 3 cities, and then 11/11/11 to focus on sending light to the center of the sun, the moon, and the earth. And in our remaining time, let's go into each of these areas, both the October 28th.
Yeah, let's call it 28.
Okay. And the 11/11/11, because synchronistically there are other global meditations which are being organized for these dates.
Sure.
Both for 11/11/11 and for October 28th, 2011, and, they don't have these specific goals of sending focused light,
right,
almost on an experimental basis,
yeah,
that we know now functions because of the research that David Wilcock has made public and coherent in his book,
right,
along with other sources. Now, so let's go to the October 28th and Washington, D.C., London, and Rome. Let's start with Washington. You've spent a lot of time, in fact, you're probably the world's leading authority on UFO sightings over Washington, D.C., going back to the 1800s. To the
1850 was the first reported one.
Yeah. And there's that area. And then we've had conversations about the whole issue of the August 23rd, 2011 Virginia earthquake, a very shallow earthquake.
Yeah.
Could you begin to tie up some of your Washington, D.C. knowledge as to you know, whether the Draco, Reptilian, and Orion Gray bases have already been knocked out there, what we're doing there, how this interacts with it, and how you see the Washington, D.C. target in terms of the in-depth knowledge that you know about Washington, D.C. as a UFO, possibly gray or reptilian target over the last, 150 years.
You know, there may have been an underground base there prior to them actually building the city. That's one of the things that I cannot confirm, but it looks as though, from the historic record, that there were tunnels, really ancient tunnels, that were existing under that land prior to them, L'Enfant. Before he actually started drawing the plans for the city, he'd already been taken down by one of the local farmers into and shown these tunnels. They didn't say where they went. But they tried to say, well, they said maybe it was Atlantis. Well, who knows? But, you know, I do know that over the years there was dozens of military, deep underground military bases or cities built around Washington, D.C., if not directly under. Certainly the modern tunnels run in every direction. That information was only declassified under the Obama administration recently. And even then, it's heavily censored. They don't show exactly where it goes. I've talked to one individual who had actually been in the modern tunnels, you know, or shown the modern tunnels. They're not completely off limits. So we have no idea what's down there. But here's what I need to tell you about this. Whether or not those bases have been destroyed, the effect of the negative impact, or the sort of like a dark energy that permeates Washington, D.C., it was set up like a circuit board to channel dark energy, my understanding of it. And as you say, I didn't wake up one morning and just say, oh, you know what, I want to be an expert on UFOs and aliens in D.C. It didn't work like that. Again, maybe I was given this mission. I don't know. All I know is after over 6 years of investigation, I found, and I think reported quite conclusively, that there are demonic, extraterrestrial, or interdimensional beings that are actually based in Washington, D.C., because they're seen so frequently, Alfred. There's no way that they're constantly just, you know, commuting. And even if they are, they're there so frequently. They obviously have an agenda. So, and it can't be good, because if you judge Washington, D.C. by the actions that are taken there, they're ruling against the will of the people. They don't really care about us very much. So, instead of being angry at the dark entities, what I propose is, in this Soul Light project, is we literally beam the loving light energy into the heart of Washington, D.C., that matrix, and begin to transmute it. That's what alchemy is. You take base metals and turn them, you know, lead into gold, right?
Now, would this be the whole day of October 28th and 11/11, or a standard time worldwide, or what?
I didn't even think that through. I mean, I know what you're saying, and I haven't set. I think it's kind of hard to do that to people.
Yeah.
I think if we work within because you know the time changes as the Earth rotates.
Yeah.
It's possible that everybody doesn't have to do this the exact same moment.
Right, because it's non-local.
Not only is it non-local, but once the energy goes there, it's not just going to evaporate as soon as you stop thinking about it.
Right.
It's a resonance. It's a resonance, okay? That's the thing we got to understand about energy. It tends to permeate things and resonate. So this, again, is why the dark side has wanted to keep us so distracted and dumbfounded for so long, is because they know we have a potential, especially when we work together. You know?
Right. Now, so that's the focus with regard to Washington. Let's jump over to the second city, which is London, UK, the seat of the British Crown and of the Zionist banking bloodlines, the city of London. Right. Together, there's a documented 350-page book on exopolitics.com called Dope Inc. And that has been run for 300 years by the British Crown and by the City of London Zionist bloodlines, and they worship God. They control God, gold, oil, and drugs. So I can see why by the evidence. And by the way, there is the UK, there's the International Tribunal for Crimes of Church and State, which is starting in October.
Wow.
In London, UK. And Exopolitics TV is just releasing an interview today with the secretary of that. The evidence, the two principal defendants are Elizabeth Windsor and Pope Joseph Ratzinger on charges of child genocide. And the evidence that we have is that the tribunal has is overwhelming. For example, this is actual witnesses that in October of 1964, Elizabeth Windsor and her consort, Prince Philip, who Elizabeth Windsor is the head of state of Canada, came here to Kamloops, British Columbia, and went to a First Nations Aboriginal school, took out 10 children, made them kiss their feet, and those children took them away, and they've never been seen again in their lives. They were probably ritually murdered by Elizabeth Windsor and her consort, and who knows how many others, and perhaps eaten in a cannibalistic, satanic ritual. And the witness to that, William Coombs, this past February, on the very day that the secretary of the tribunal left from Vancouver for London, was assassinated here in Vancouver. And we have a full report on that. Fortunately, his testimony is on videotape, so that'll be shown at the tribunal. And the Catholic Church and the British Crown implemented a policy of destroying the First Nations culture in Canada and of taking all the children forcibly from their families and put them in residential schools where they were genocided and murdered. And we now are digging up the remains. So that is what the British Crown and the Vatican, the residential schools were run by the churches, were doing in implementation here. They were doing a genocide, an Aboriginal genocide of millions of people. So I can see how you would have been directed to London. Now, please tell me what else you have discovered about London.
You covered it very well. The fact is, and I only found this after I published my second book, Covert Encounters in Washington, D.C., London is set up exactly like Washington, D.C., in that it is the ruling district. They're isolated, they make the laws, but they're not part of the country, and they act accordingly. In other words, everybody is subject to the whims of the ruling elite in those little fortresses of darkness, I call them, I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. I'm very upset by what you said.
Even the Queen, who is the head of state of Britain, Canada, other countries, and has a tremendous role and is a very large landowner of much of the planet's land. And there's studies that have just come out on that. Even the Queen enters with an armed escort when she goes into the city of London, which is a specific part which is ruled over by the Zionist banking bloodlines.
Yeah, the Rothschild, the Merovingian, whatever you want to call them. So I believe they're also the ones that are behind the oil spill, so-called spill in the Gulf.
Yeah.
And all the toxins that they dumped into the Gulf.
Yeah.
In order to their plan is basically eliminate a good portion of the people that are living on the surface. And it's completely satanic, demonic, Luciferian, whatever you want to call it. We're talking about the same thing here. And the same, unfortunately, goes for the Vatican. Every piece of information that I was able to find and document in my new book, it shows that Washington, D.C. is the sister city to Rome or the Vatican. And there's some very, very similar things going on there. And it's a historic thing. So, and I know we've chronicled it here before, so I don't know how much more you want to talk about it, but I can tell you that it is desperately in need of light. I mean, really good, loving, light energy needs to be shown down into that hole of darkness.
Well, we have reports from Brazil, for example, that under certain Catholic cathedrals, there are actually, those are places that the street urchin and young children disappear into, and they're taken into ritualistic satanic murder. And
Alfred, please, you got to stop telling me this because you're freaking me out. Okay, every time you say that, I'm reliving what I experienced with that young boy.
Right.
Okay, you don't have to be taken by the Vatican or the Zionists or even the politicians in D.C. For Christ's sake, these entities have a grip on our world. They could be anywhere, even in a beautiful place like Malibu. So, in fact, people don't realize this. There's a lot of suicides that occurred in Malibu. A lot. I knew most of those people in the years I was growing up there. Nobody ever wanted to talk about it. Nobody could seem to figure it out. Nobody seemed to even care that we had a record number of suicides. So what I'm saying is that these dark entities, they prey on people that are weak, and obviously who among us is the weakest is the children. I don't know why they pick on boys, but like I said, that particular boy that I intervened with, I'm guessing he was about 9 or 10. The original storyline for The Exorcist was a 13-year-old boy in 1949 in Washington, D.C. Okay? And the Catholic Church was totally involved in that from beginning to end. Now, here's my question about this. If they're exorcising the demons, how come they're still here? What are you guys doing? I mean, seriously.
Right. Now, let's jump over to the 11 target. So we've established now, and maybe I'm coming across with this information so strongly because today, just prior to interviewing you now, I interviewed the secretary, Reverend Kevin Annett, of the International Tribunal for Crimes of Church and State. So all that he has recited is fresh in my mind.
I understand.
So perhaps there's a certain wisdom in the synchronicity of these two interviews, and that is that the experience that you had of really bringing light to this child that was possessed by a demon is actually being replicated here by asking all of us to come together and focus our energy on the 3 locations of, say, prime demon inhabitation. I mean, I'm just kind of like trying to make sense of what's going on.
Yeah,
now,
sure.
Let's switch to the 11, and you say there, on November 11, 2011, we invite you to visualize your soul light beaming down from heaven to the center of the sun, the earth, and the moon. These celestial spheres will use the loving light energy consciousness you send them to heal and evolve life on earth. Could you talk just a bit about that?
Yeah. Okay. Part of my education coming out here to New England was meeting the last shaman of the Wampanoag tribe, and they were the ones. And historically, people would recognize that when the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock, they were befriended by a group of natives, and that was the Wampanoag tribe. And the man who was in charge at that time, who was called their title for the great leader is Massasoit. But he also carried the title of what the Europeans called an Osameguin. And we're going to loosely call it shaman, but it's way deeper than that. I mean, some of the things I've been taught by this, I was introduced to this individual, became very fast friends. I mean, like brothers. In one day, we just met and became like family. And he started telling me that there was events that were coming. Much of it you've already reported. But he told me this prior to it becoming public knowledge. These were things that the Osameguin was charged, this information was charged being carried forward from generation to generation. And because he was the last generation, he was passing it on to me in hopes that I would hopefully, pass it on to somebody, even though I'm not part of the tribe. We spoke the same language and we're coming from the same place in our hearts. And he recognized, our kinship. So he told me, he says, that the Earth would evolve, but that there would come a time when key individuals would, the way he described it, were literally going to jump to the center of the Earth. And I didn't know what to make of that, but as I was having my discussion or download from the Father, it looked to me like the light that we were beaming was going to go into the center of these three planetary bodies because they're all connected, and that this was going to trigger a transformational surge of energy for the positive. Now, until we try it, we'll never know, but the planet needs healing. The sun needs stabilizing. The moon, believe it or not, this is going to sound completely far out, especially when my shaman friend told me this. He said, the moon is leaving us. I'm like, where's it going? He goes, it's got to go its own way. We're going to be... You see, he was trying to... He didn't want to tell me the whole story. Some people are saying now that the Earth would move to a fourth dimension. It won't need a moon. It may not even need a sun because it's connected to a higher source of energy. So it may, like I said, it might be like a butterfly. It may literally evolve to a higher state and just move away. I don't know. But anyway, he was telling me, he says that there would come a time when he and other individuals would literally jump to the center of the Earth to help with this process. So that was obviously in the back of my mind. That's all he told me. And so, as I said, maybe I'm, embellishing this, but it really sounded logical to me. You got the three cities, you got the three celestial bodies.
Right.
And again, it's what I describe on there. I'll just say it real quick again. Our bodies, our cities, our planet, it takes energy in and radiates energy back out. Everything is connected like that. So if it's taking good energy in and being filtered in a negative way, you're going to have a negative outcome. If we transform the vibration of these key areas of darkness to start, and then we set ourselves up to project this loving light energy consciousness to the center of our mother. I mean, this is our home. That we, like I said, you take the sun out, we're dead. The moon, dead again. All of these three things, this trinity is working together to create a little matrix, a macrocosm of life for us to evolve. So it will be extremely empowering for everybody who participates to know that they actually help contribute to the evolution of life here in this little matrix. Right.
And, just to make that congruent with some of the information from other spheres, notably from a galactic governance council known as the Andromeda Council. And I think that the representative of that council, Tolek. What he says is that the kind of the police action by the upper dimensional human governance councils against to throw the reptilian and Orion Gray's forces out of the Earth, Moon, and Mars resulted from there as upper dimensionals being able to survey time back and forth, that they had located a real trouble in this sector of the universe about 350, 370 years from now, when a great dictatorship or tyranny or just bad thing arose, and they traced it back to Earth, the Moon, and Mars, which was our Illuminati and fourth dimensional Draco Gray occupation, moving the Illuminati into the underground bases on Earth, the bases on Mars, and the bases on the Moon. And that now that has been gone out. So now we would bring in our light directly into the sun, which some say is inhabited, into the moon, which some say is an artificial satellite, and into the Earth, Gaia, and kind of cleanse and re-energize these centers that up until recently were occupied by fourth dimensional Orion Gray and Draco reptilian forces.
And Alfred, let's be very clear with the audience here. What you described, although extremely graphically, much to my horror, The reason that they do the ritual abuse and genocide is because it sets up a dark energy.
Yeah.
So they feed off of this. I remember I told you in Star Wars, you look at the Sith Lords, they wanted you to be angry and fearful and kill.
Yeah.
And this is how the dark side works. So they set up these resonant fields of darkness, fear, and anger. We can dispel them. Is why I think this is important. And people need to consider piggybacking. I would hope that people who are awake and who have organized different events that coincide with what I'm proposing, that we could piggyback some of these events so that we're more focused on a specific outcome.
Yeah.
It's just, love and light. I'm all for it, but let's have a particular goal. Let's focus and see what happens.
And see what happens. So that really was my question, and kind of we've come to the end of this segment. So kind of summing it all up, do you see yourself reaching out? These I know that I'm part of a speaking event in Los Angeles on 11/11/11, which is titled Cosmic Alchemy.
Hey,
so,
really?
Yeah. So you can easily look up these meditations on Google, and for October 28th and for 11/11/11. Do you see yourself and taking this message? I know that this interview and an accompanying article will be out shortly. Do you see yourself taking this message to them and starting to cohere this? Because this is a process of networking and agreement. Was that part of your charge here, do you think?
If necessary, I'll do that. Like I said, I'm here to help. But I'm certainly not going to just, push myself onto people or projects that, I respect people, what they're doing. And I hope we can work together and collaborate for the good of all mankind. Because as you say, I know what the future holds if we don't do things like this.
Yeah.
It's going to be very ugly.
Now, people who may be watching this interview or reading the article or looking at our various websites would say, well, hey, great. October 28, 2011, 11/11/11, these are targets. I see why these targets is a sound empirical base. There's a sound scientific base in terms of the source field and transforming all of this. So we break through that skeptic kind of threshold. How can practically they get in touch with you so that we can begin to coordinate all of this? And where do they go for more information?
I see. Thank you. It's Unicus Magazine. That's spelled UNICUS magazine.com. And particularly this project, Project Soul Light Project, is it's on the banner. It says Know Thyself. It's at the very top of the page. That gives you a whole other menu of metaphysical data that you can digest at your leisure. I also, every page on my website has a contact and email, or you just, if you don't prefer, it's editor@unicusmagazine.com, but there's links out there on all my web pages. You can contact me there. I'm actually disenchanted with blogging, because what I'm getting is a lot of those backlink nonsense.
I don't know what that is.
Somebody gets paid to generate these false commentary on your pages, so that
it's spam.
So it is. It's spam, and it links you to a commercial website.
Yeah, on my blog, there's a thing where you can mark that as spam and block the IP address. It but 5 seconds.
Okay, and I've been doing that, but I'm still getting dozens every day.
But
it's take a while.
But let me say my experience, which may energize you.
Okay.
I was targeted a long time ago. All of that is done by Intel. And depending on your project, they hit you with that kind of spam to knock you off. And I worked with my company, which is TypePad, to work it out till we have dozens of spam filters. And as soon as I say, oh, I'm going to do this on the phone, then the next day I get 2 or 3 of those on old articles of those things. So it's part of the worldwide surveillance of the dark side. So don't let the bastards get you down.
I'm very
just be totally practical about it, and just put up the spam filters and knock them off, because that is not random. It's not random commercial. It's part of what we call COINTELPRO.
Yes.
Galactic COINTELPRO, to get you off your track on the mission that you're doing now.
Yeah, well, it's not working. I don't think. But thanks again for having me on.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, again, please, this is Project Soul Light. It's October 28th, 2011.
Correct.
Sending light to Washington, D.C., London, UK, and Rome, the Vatican.
The Vatican.
And on 11/11/11, sending light and healing energy to the center of the sun, the earth, and the moon. And again, where can people get in touch with you?
It's the only way I can explain it is unicusmagazine.com. That is my main website. And there's a lot of free stuff there if you're interested in some of the music. Actually, well, I'll leave you with this. One of the projects that I'm working on that I'm passionate about is my rendition of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata.
Oh.
And so I'm calling it the Soul Light Sonata, because it's, instead of just piano, I broke it up into the strings up here for arpeggio. There's a bass, and on top is that little melody, that beautiful little melody. That's an electric guitar.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It's chilling. I mean, for me anyway, it's something I've been wanting to do for years because I keep hearing it, and now it's becoming manifest. So I'm going to try and tie those together.
Oh, excellent. Well, look, thank you very much for being with us, and we look forward to hearing from you again as these projects, begin to mature. And right now, we're all going to concentrate on October 28th and 11/11/11, Washington, London, and Rome, 11/11/11, the sun, the earth, and the moon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alfred.